it should just stay at home except for Monday night.
Yeah.
Good evening.
And
I'd like to welcome you all to the March 19th Washougal City Council meeting. Ask that you please rise and join us at the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the Constitution of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Rose, could you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Russell. Councilmember Plinsky.
Here.
Councilmember Greenlee.
Here.
Councilmember Lindsay.
Here.
Councilmember McDaniel.
Here.
Councilmember Shoemaker.
Here.
Councilmember Freeman.
Here.
Thank you. I understand Councilmember Russell may be running a couple minutes late this evening. Are there any amendments to the agenda?
I would like to pull the accounts payable from the consent agenda.
Okay, we'll handle that when
All
we
right.
get to the consent agenda. Any other amendments to the agenda itself? Okay, seeing none. Rose, do we have any correspondence this evening?
No.
Okay. And we're at the first opportunity for any individuals in the public that wish to speak to council this evening. We do have 3 public hearings this evening. One on the Liberty Land and Development request for easement, another one on the Hamilton property, and a third one on the Port of Camas Washougal's property on 6th Street. We'll take any comments on those items during those public hearings themselves, but if there are any individuals in the public that wish to speak to council on any other matters, now is the time to do it. Yes. If you would come up to the microphone, give us your name and address.
My name is Robert Hill, 1223 Fairway Drive. I'd like to address the issue as far as the coal trains and the train traffic coming through Washougal. I am a locomotive engineer with BNSF Railway, so I'm not speaking on behalf of the company, just as far as my experience working with the railroad and stuff. There's a lot of information that's a little misleading that's been going on out there. And I know they're concerned with the traffic and the coal dust. I got children that go to school here, so I'm not about to sell my family's health for a paycheck. As far as this train traffic, there's numbers of 80 to 100 possibly coming through our community. It won't happen. When it's virtually impossible, they'd have to call a train every 15 minutes. Right now, they can't even get 30 trains coming through on the Fall Bridge as it sits. These numbers that you heard are probably from the port, but there's several different, dry mouth, excuse me, several different avenues for the coal to get there. One is through Canada, another one is by the UP, and there's 3 routes on the BNSF alone that they're able to get that across. So 100 trains coming through this community or 30 coal trains is virtually impossible. There's a lot of the traffic as far as grain trains that do come through here. As far as the coal dust issue, mitigation with that, the railroad did sue the coal companies in order to mitigate that dust issue. And the reason was that we're having derailments because initially coming out of the mines there was some coal dust that was coming off and causing derailments. So it was a financial liability for the company. So that has been mitigated. And that was as of October of 2011, I believe is when that transpired. So I think the concerns as far as that goes, I think they're unfounded. Maybe some of the medical studies that were done were actually done in the coal mines, not from trains passing by. Well, I'm trying to think of some of the other issues that were brought up. Was there a workshop that was done as far as all these issues?
We've had, there have been a number of discussions. Last meeting was probably the largest one at our workshop where some of the issues were talked back and forth, but we've had other presentations as well.
All right. At this time, I'd like to ask for this issue to be tabled until maybe we can get some more information as far as this goes to counteract and get some actual facts out on this.
Mr. Mayor, have you read tonight's resolution yet?
Yes, I have.
You have, okay.
Yeah.
Did you find any discrepancies in it?
As far as the resolution itself, I'm not sure why you're asking for the economic impact study on this. There's not really any information as far as countering that.
Right.
So,
I just, it just seems like the position that this council is going to be taking down the resolution is complementary to what you're saying tonight, so, so I just want
I'd just like to have the opportunity to be able to have, maybe perhaps have a workshop to give another side to it as far as the public issue on this, because it seems like it's all been kind of one-sided, and I'm just asking for a fair chance.
Well, and that's one of the things that we've asked for, a couple of things that we've asked for in the resolution is for any of the parties or the group party itself that are working on the scoping of the EIS and the NEIS is to, one, include the cities that are along the rails so that we can truly sit down at the table with everybody and find out really what is the answers to some of the questions we've been asking or some of the things that have been posed. And the second thing is also for some of those meetings to take place down here in the Clark County area so that we're not having to drive to Bellingham or somewhere else and actually be able to talk with those folks here in our own yards. So,
Okay, I agree. That's all I had.
thank you very much, Mr. Hill.
Thank you.
Are there other members of the public that would like to address council this evening? Yes.
Margaret Tweet, 2715 Northwest 34th Circle, Camas.
Could you speak up a little bit for me?
Okay, tomorrow CTRAN is going to discuss whether a light rail funding vote will be held at all, and if so, whether it will be district-wide. And I request that our CTRAN representative for Camas and Washougal can support a district-wide vote. I believe that's what our community wants. In September 2010, CTRAN passed a resolution for our light rail vote in November 2011. That would have been district-wide by law. Then CTRAN diverted the vote, and if the vote is to be held after July 2012, it can be a gerrymandered limited subdistrict that doesn't include Camas or Washougal. Last year, I went to the Camas and this council urging a 2011 vote just so that Camas and Washougal would be certain to be included. The former Camas mayor explained that we would have a vote. The CTRAN ballot measure, which was mailed district-wide twice in July and August, advertised that there would be a vote, and that was an advertisement sent district-wide. On March 5th, at a CTRAN retreat, CTRAN leadership explained if the light rail ballot measure failed, the funds could come from the general fund, which is allowed by law. TriMet, it's going to have an impact district-wide. If you've been reading the news, you may have noticed that TriMet has proposed service cuts. Of course, none of those are to light rail, they're all to the buses. Furthermore, we have their TriMet's debt approaching $1 billion, which will be intricately linked to should we join in this light rail effort. Furthermore, there's tolls on state routes, such as State Route 14, or bridges, that will impact us all. Right now, there's multiple CRC parking garages being built ostensibly to draw the whole district. That's going to be a district-wide impact. We're all going to be impacted by your choice and how this council views that, so I urge you to have a local hearing, like you're doing on the coal issue. And there were no local hearings, by the way, on the locally preferred alternative of light rail. So it would be good to have a local hearing where you could address this topic specifically, both in Camas and in Washougal. And I urge you to give it due consideration because it will impact us all. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public wishing to address council? Okay, seeing none, we will move into the consent agenda. This evening we have a consent agenda comprised of 4 items. Our city council minutes of March 5th, 2012, our workshop minutes of March 12th, 2012, regular accounts payable claims in the amount of $141,891.46, and Agenda Bill 2412, setting a public hearing for the Critical Areas Memorandum Agreement with Clark Public Utilities. I understand that we want to pull item number C. Are there any other changes to the consent agenda?
Mr. Mayor, I ask unanimous consent that we approve the consent agenda items A, B, and D.
Hearing no objections, so ordered. Going to the accounts payables. Councilman Greenlee.
Let me pass some things out here. And keep passing that on around to staff. There should be enough, and then a few for audience also. We passed last meeting a change in the E-Verify ordinance, which is law for the city of Washougal. It talks about contracts. I'm passing around a definition of contract from Black's Law Dictionary. It's available as blackslawonline.org. For those who don't know, Black's Law is the dictionary for law. It's the standard. Next to the bottom definition, a contract is an agreement by which one person obligates himself to another to give, do, or permit, or to not to do something expressed or implied by such agreement. Or as my professor used to say, if you have agreement, consideration, and performance, you have a contract. If we now shift to the ordinance which was passed, Section 1 basically requires E-Verify for all contractors. That's a problem because if I give a package to UPS and they promise to make a best efforts basis, on a best efforts basis to deliver the package for a fee, that is a contract. UPS operates in more than 50 countries, with nationals from those countries operating in those countries. It's inconceivable that they could do an E-Verify on their Chinese employees in China. So that means we can't use UPS.
Councilman, I'm going to, if I could, I'm going to take the floor for a moment. In the discussions, and I'm not sure where all you're heading with this, in the discussions that we had in the changes to E-Verify, I think we made it as clear as we could that the definition of contractor for those are contractors that we would hire to do public works projects within the city. Specifically, we spoke to the fact that this was not, the ordinance was not intended to be something that would get into copiers that we may buy, FedEx packages we may send, or that type of stuff.
But it doesn't say that. Mr. Mayor?
Well, I didn't realize this was going to be brought up tonight, but I do recall that there's commercially off-the-shelf items like purchasing paper, and those are specifically excluded from the E-Verify. Whether that would be broad enough to include, you know, giving the package to Federal Express or UPS, Councilman may have a point that needs to be clarified a little bit further.
Section 3, item E, exception. Do you have the text in front of you?
I don't.
Mr. Mayor, point of order.
Yes.
Is this not an item that's more appropriately handled at a workshop?
Ultimately, but my point is that by the definite, let me just read that part of E. Notwithstanding any other provision herein, the resolution shall not apply to purchase by the city of any commercially available off-the-shelf items where no labor or service is supplied as an element of the purchase of those items. Therefore, of the accounts payable that came forward today, if they were to come forward 2 months from now, we would not be able to pay under penalty of law. Allen Webb used car, they did a repair. American Fleet Maintenance, they did a repair. Angela's Slot, that's a community room refund, but the contract is that they leave the room clean or they don't get their money back. I could go on and on and on, but the one that pops out right away as being Camus Cleaners. If I take my shirt in or my police uniform in and say, you clean it, I'll pay, that's a contract. And under our existing rules, that can't be, you can't do that.
Okay,
So
let's-
I agree that this has to be workshopped. And
Well,
that's my entire point.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I would just like to clarify, so for the record, UPS actually uses E-Verify. So if you want to use them as an example, just let you know. But as a side note, you're using the technical definition of a contract, correct?
That's all
But-
you can do under law.
Okay.
Let's,
Well, we'll just add a word or two to change it and make it so that it complies with
if we could,
the annual interrogation.
to move forward, one, if the council so sees fit to bring forward a motion and a second for the approval of accounts payables, I think the point's well taken, and if Attorney English believes that we need to potentially insert some additional language or some additional
up to
clarifications,
council.
then we should do that. Well, we certainly can't have an impasse at meetings where we're not going to pay our bills. So I believe, again, I believe that the intent was made, I'll now say fairly clear. I believe it was pretty explicitly clear. If you were to ask me which items we would pay or not pay under that, I could probably put something down on a piece of paper, but it sounds like that could be argued potentially successfully. So let's revisit it. Let's go back and take care of it however we need to.
Mr. Mayor, I believe first, if staff could just do their due diligence in looking at other cities who have gone to 0 contracts to make sure and see how theirs read. I don't think that ours will be too far off of where they are. And so,
I would agree.
just want to throw that off too.
Well, and I move that we approve the accounts payable.
Second.
I've got a motion and a second to approve the regular accounts payable claims. Any other council discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I apologize, I don't want to cut off discussion on that, but I can see
No,
where
I-
we were potentially going, so let's just make sure that
Yeah,
we
no,
get it onto the next
this
workshop.
really does need to be workshopped, and we probably actually need to postpone implementation until we can properly go through it.
Okay, moving to new business items, Agenda Bill 2512, a public hearing to authorize the mayor to sign a Liberty Land and Development request for easement. I apologize, Mr. Knipe is out very sick this evening, so Mr. Scott is going to take his spot.
Thank you, Mayor. I will do my best.
Rose?
That worked. Okay. So far, so good. Council, before you this evening is a request regarding a proposed easement to be granted by the city to Liberty Land and Development. There'll be a public hearing that you have scheduled for this evening, so I'll give a brief staff report just for everyone, and then advise you of staff's recommended action. So Liberty Land and Development is requesting that the city grant an easement for ingress and egress and utilities across the open space portion of a tract that was previously dedicated to us as part of a subdivision that was the Riverview Terrace Phase 1 development. And as you recall from our workshops on this item, the statute provides that the council has the authority to grant an easement across open space where it will not impair public access or won't be any physical barriers constructed. Open space, has a certain high standing in terms of its maintenance over time when open space is provided as part of a subdivision, and so this statute is designed to ensure that that high standing is protected, but it reasonably provides the opportunity for access to be provided across open space as long as there won't be an impairment to our use of that or physical barriers. And it provides that a hearing be conducted in order for you to hear from concerned parties about it. As you may recall, this item was before you in 2007, same request There was a motion to grant the easement. There was not a second, so that motion failed, and there was no further action at that time. This map gives you an idea of where the lot is. You've seen this before. You can see West Circle, the cul-de-sac near the yellow shaded parcel. There'll be another image in a moment that gives a little detailed view, but that is the single-family lot. It's located within the city of Camas. This shows the Tract A coming off the bulb of the cul-de-sac at West Circle. You can see the rectangular lot there and the dark lined easement, which is 20 feet wide, extending from the cul-de-sac across the open space and to the lot. Staff's recommended action this evening is that you hold the hearing and then authorize the mayor to sign an easement granting to Liberty Land and Development a non-exclusive easement for ingress, egress, and utilities across the described property, subject to several conditions. Those conditions being that fair market value be paid, and that's been identified as $2,000. That the easement be limited for the purpose of providing access and utilities to one, excuse me, single-family lot. That the easement comply with the statute, of course, regarding no physical barriers being placed or erected on the property, and then that Liberty Land and Development execute the attached indemnification and hold harmless agreement, which was provided to you as an update. It's very straightforward indemnification. So that is our recommended action upon the public hearing. With that, I would answer any questions that you might have.
Before we get to that, let's go ahead and open the public hearing. I would ask any individuals who may wish to speak to the Liberty Land and Development request for easement to come forward to the microphone, give your names, address, and limited to a 3-minute comment period. Good evening, Leanne.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. Thank you again for this opportunity to address you and respectfully request that you grant an easement to my client, Liberty Land Development. Here in the audience with me tonight is the principal, Jason Thompson. As Mr. Scott explained, we were before the city before making this request, and for the lack of a second, it was not approved, and we hope that you will reconsider. And the request is slightly different this time around. We've added some protections for the city that I'll get into in a second. Back in 2006, 2007, my client had gone, had actually had a survey done, legal description prepared, an appraisal done to determine fair market value for the easement, and all of that is still valid today and incorporated into our request. My client has the opportunity to create, or this lot actually that does exist, but build a house on it and actually put the land to a use that, a profitable use, hopefully. The reason that the lot, if you wouldn't mind putting up the map again, the lot cannot be served from the south is because of severe slopes. And I was actually up there this afternoon, and I can certainly attest to that. There really is only one way into this lot. The property further to the south of the yellow parcel is an approved subdivision in the city of Camas. It's just has preliminary plat approval until the market rebounds, and eventually there will be single-family houses there. So this lot will fit into the neighborhood just fine, and as well as with Riverview Terrace to the north. We had incorporated language into the easement to address Mr. Russell's concern at the last meeting that this lot will only be used for one single-family residence, despite what the zoning allows in the city of Camas. And frankly, the zoning is R10, and it would allow, under normal circumstances, it would allow very limited commercial-type uses. But with having a private covenant incorporated into the easement, that covenant will trump any zoning, and it will run with the land, and this lot can only be used for a single-family residence, just one, not multiple family, not commercial, not institutional uses. So we believe we've addressed that concern that was raised last time. And as I observed today, the area that we're talking about where the 20-foot, essentially will be a driveway to the house, is a grassy field. It does not impact the stormwater facilities in this tract that's owned by the city. It doesn't affect the wetlands or the buffers. So it'll stay clear of that. There are CC&Rs for Riverview Terrace, and I reviewed them, and there's nothing in those CC&Rs that prevents the city from granting an easement across its own property. And certainly as a public street, folks are allowed to use South Circle. I understand this house will pay city water and sewer, and can connect to those utilities. And lastly, the indemnification and hold harmless agreement that's before you tonight. I just saw it myself for the first time, and my client is perfectly willing to sign it. That should the city be challenged on this action tonight, my client will step in and defend the city in any such action. We're fairly confident nothing could be challenged successfully, but so we're willing to sign the agreement in any event. So I'm here available to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Leanne.
Thank you.
Are there other members of the public, other members of the neighborhood that would like to step forward and speak to the issue? Yes.
Thank you. Steve Lambert, 612 West T Street, which is part of Riverview Terrace Home. So I am the president of the Homeowners Association there, Riverview Terrace, and I'm here on behalf of the rest of RVT OHA. Several are here in the audience, but to be honest, there wasn't a lot of notification on this particular piece. There's no signage put out, so we knew that this was going to take place. So I think we would have had a lot more support if that was what was the fact. A little bit about our Homeowners Association, HOA for short. We have about 100 people, 100 homes or tracts in our HOA. We pay quarterly dues. We have a CC&Rs in place, which was mentioned. We have an architectural committee, which tries to keep the utmost look of the area to obviously keep our property value as high as it can, which will obviously cycle back to more tax benefit for Washougal. We have a landscape committee. We recently put in a neighborhood watch program for safety of the area. We meet on a regular basis. So we're trying to do things to make this neighborhood the best we can and keep it that way and preserved. I don't know if you ever had a chance to go through our lovely neighborhood, but we do enjoy it. However, we don't feel it is fair to be able to put an easement through our development into a neighborhood, as you saw, was basically an extension of Riverview Terrace without complying to our HOA as well. So those are the concerns that we have, and so we're not really in favor of making this motion pass.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, clarification? Did you say that you're not in favor unless they apply to your association for membership or for?
Well, I think if they wanted to be part of the HOA, we'd have to bring it up to our board and see if that is permissible in our text. Basically, that is something we could look at. But obviously, so right now, without being part of our CC&Rs, then they could build basically what they wanted to at that lot, but come through our development to get to that spot. So there are several homes, and again, the notification, I'm not sure how they notify the people in our area, but there's on that S Street alone, there was nobody that got mailings within 5 houses of it. So
Dave, remind me, we should have sent notifications within at least 200 feet?
I'm not sure what notification that Mitch did. This is a unique type of public hearing. It's not really subject to the land use provisions for a typical subdivision or something like that. I know he was to do notice, but I did not ask him specifically what he did.
Okay. I guess maybe one of the follow-up questions might be to follow up with Councilman Shoemaker. Steve, and it may not be something you can answer this evening. If there was a requirement that the property owner make the property part of the Riverview Terrace Homeowners Association, would that change the, I guess, the stance that you have in regards to the granting of the easement or not?
Yeah, it possibly could, yes. I'd have to bring it by the board, so we'd have more time.
Don, is that something that we could even impose?
Well, the CCNRs, as I recall.
It's in Camas, so the property's in Camas, so.
Well, but the CCNRs.
Your access is out of Riverview Terrace. though.
Right, I understand that. I think the CCNR is required to add somebody at like a 2/3 vote or something, and there has to be an application for, first there has to be an application from a potential new homeowner to join, so, I mean, it's mainly governed by the CCNRs.
Okay, I'd have to look into that to see what kind of votes would need it to pass, add on
I
to
think
somebody.
it's like a 2/3 if I recall.
I think when Don and I discussed this, Mayor, in granting this easement, similar to the other condition that Ms. Bremer brought up about the restriction on the use, I think you could impose conditions in the transaction. It's basically a private covenant, if you would, through the easement document that would record in perpetuity. But as the gentleman has indicated, your action wouldn't provide that they are in the homeowners association, only that it would have to take place.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there other members of the public that would like to address council on the issue?
Council, my name is Terry Glenn. I'm the developer of Riverview Terrace. Live at 901 Southeast 380th Court, Washougal. We're concerned about this, as spoken before, because this lot would not be subject to the CCNRs. And I was, the council, back at the time that Riverview Terrace was developed, the council made a number of requirements on the developer in exchange for allowing the plat. One of them was that there would be a certain amount of open space, and that, of course, was negotiated with city staff, and there was give and take, as there always is, but this particular amount of open space was required, and we had to give that to the city as part of the requirements to get our plat approved. Also required was that the CCNR, there be CCNRs, and the city wanted to look at those CCNRs before they were committed to the land. And so that was done, and we wrote CCNRs that would assure that property values remained, and that homes looked a certain way, and that your neighbor doesn't have a chicken coop and a mobile home down the street next to a large, nice home. So this easement into a lot that would, from all intents and purposes, would look like this is part of Riverview Terrace, because they're going to access it through Riverview Terrace, drive down Riverview Terrace Street into this home, but yet have none of the restrictions that the CCNRs provide. It's kind of the best deal for CCNRs. We all want to have a home that has CCNRs on our neighbors, but not on us, and that's what we're creating here for a very, very small amount of money. So I think the CCNRs are very important. I think it's not equitable to the other residents of Riverview Terrace that they provide the dollars to pay for the landscaping and create a very nice neighborhood there, and all the effort, and have this home be able to take all the advantages of that with no contribution. That said, the CCNRs could be applied to that piece of land if the owner so chose, and I believe it is 2/3 to approval of the association, which has its own challenges, but that is a potential. The other concern I have is back to that the city required us to gift this land to the city on the pretense that we needed open space, and we're going to change this if this is approved. This is going to become a private driveway. They're going to pave it. They're going to put landscaping down both sides of it. It's going to look like a private driveway, and is no longer open space in any context. It may be an easement, but I mean, in all, from outward appearance, it's going to be private land. And it's going to split an area that is open space into two different sections. And quite frankly, it's going to limit opportunities for a piece of land that we still own to the west of it. There's a large 3-acre parcel that given the market, we don't have any real plans for. But we'd like to keep our options open, and this is going to limit that. And we're the ones that gave the land to the city in the first place. So I think there's a moral issue there, taking land from us and then giving it to somebody else for another purpose that we object to, and frankly, taking money for it. The last comment, I'll keep it relatively short. In terms of market value, there was another piece of land that we granted an easement to when we developed the property that's in the city of Camas. It's on down about where West 8th is shown there on the map. And it's a similar lot that's just south of, and when we did that, the fair market value of the value that the owner paid us was around $30,000, and so far different than what's being asked here. And we required them to apply the CC&Rs to their land, and they are part of the association. That was somewhat more simple because we were still the developer, and I had the power to simply grant it. With that, I was 2/3, so that simplified things somewhat. But anyway, so that's kind of another thought there. So thank you.
Thank you, Terry.
Clarification?
Mm-hmm.
Can you show us on the map where that 3-acre parcel is that you're talking about?
Yeah, can you go back to the, well, oh no, it's right through the yellow, just directly north of the yellow. There's a somewhat triangular piece. No, it's
At the end of T Street?
there's kind of a little swath coming off the yellow piece going up to the right. Or is it?
At the end of West T?
Right below the, see where it says West V Street? Up at the top, up midway up.
Yes.
That's one corner, and it comes down to the yellow.
Oh, that whole,
That parcel.
that large.
The larger parcel just across V Street is the assisted living facility there. If you were to drive into Riverview Terrace, if you're familiar with it, there's the monument sign is actually on that piece of property. It's about halfway on that parcel. And then it extends down to the cul-de-sac there at the west circle.
And how would this driveway affect the development?
Well, there was discussion at one time that depending on what was put there, at the last time it was discussed, it was in the height of the building boom, and there was talk of some kind of townhomes or something like that would be appropriate in that zoning thing, and that it would be desirable to have circular transportation through there. And that was a concept that the council had for the whole Woodburn Hill area, and all the neighborhoods have intersecting roads, so that you don't have this neighborhood, if you will, that you can only get in and out of one direction that we see elsewhere in the county. I think good planning, really. We have it in ours would connect in to the next development to the east. If that particular parcel were developed in that kind of a way, it would probably be desirable to have circular routing through S Street. And this would put basically put somebody's driveway right where the natural place for that would be. Now, there is no plans for, unless you have any great ideas what we should do with that parcel, I'm open, but right now it's a great place to grow weeds, but someday, it could be anything from, the zoning on it's fairly open. More likely some kind of an assisted living kind of thing would be my guess. But my point is that by granting this easement to somebody that didn't have any participation in Riverview Terrace, after having taken the land from us, you're limiting our options.
Mr. Mayor, one last question for you. What year were the CC&Rs approved?
2005, I believe.
Okay.
2004, maybe? 5?
Somewhere in there.
Somewhere in there.
In the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you, Terry.
I have another couple
Terry,
of questions.
Terry.
for you. I don't remember, I was on council when this first came up, but I don't remember. Was that land in lieu of any park impact fees?
No.
Okay. And
No, I think we got the benefit of paying those too.
okay. That kind of, I'll call it sausage shaped or flattened S that meets directly in the yellow piece.
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
And then
That's the wetland.
that's the wetland. And
Yeah,
that's deeded wetland.
That's actually a portion of the wetland. That's actually a stream that runs through there,
Right.
which creates another question. The stream is, you can see where that drops into, and it's a natural stream that existed on the property, as far as I know, forever. And it dead ends into this property, and I'm not quite sure what that means. I'm not a hydrologist, but it seems like a bad thing. And then there's a little V-shaped piece, well, actually, kind of runs along the above West S Circle there. That's the actual wetland, swales and whatnot.
And then, I'm not sure this really matters, but when the property was deeded to the city, was it deeded from your development corporation or from the homeowners association?
From the development corporation. Literally, it was the part of the deal to have the plat approved. We had certain requirements. One of them was to deed land to the city, which is fun. I mean, that's a great thing.
Yeah,
I'm all for it, and we were very agreeable to having open space. We as developers wanted more open space in the development, and there was certainly some exchange. We wanted this, and the city wanted open space as well, and we'll negotiate over here on this thing. And there is more open space than code requires. But that was known and agreed to, and that was part of the deal. We wanted that, the city wanted that, because I think we would all agree open space tends to be a good thing for a community.
Great, thank you.
Go ahead, Joe.
It is a beautiful neighborhood. I'm a school bus driver for Camas, and I've driven through that neighborhood a lot. It's a beautiful spot. And Joyce and I visited this area because seeing it on this little two-dimensional drawing was really difficult for us, and so it was very educational to go out and see it in person. Just a few questions about the comment of the citizens from within Riverview Terrace raised concerns over decrease in property values and lack of protection of open space. And the developer of Riverview Terrace subdivision had previously registered objections to the city with regard to the proposed easement. But those are very vague. I'm just curious if you can be specific over what would cause property values to be decreased because of that. After seeing it, I see that there'd be a curb cut and that driveway drops off. You wouldn't even see that driveway except that if you're really close to it. And the house is way below that. So I'm just curious how it decreases the values.
If you have a neighborhood that everybody has to subscribe to a certain set of rules.
I totally agree with the CC&R idea, yes.
And then the guy next door doesn't have to subscribe to those rules, and he desires to have a metal pole building and chickens and pigs and a mobile home. And this particular group of neighborhoods said, no, what we want to have is nice homes, very nice homes with nice landscaping, and we want to have rules that say you can't have chickens and pigs. That's where the property values, because the guy on lot 4 there at the end can see that house quite well. Actually, 4, 5, and 6 can see that house quite well. And we've got traffic from that house routing through the neighborhood to the potential buyer a year from now or 10 years from now. It's going to look like that lot is part of Riverview Terrace.
Right.
Everybody would probably come to the conclusion that if you drive through the neighborhood to get to the lot, you're probably part of the neighborhood.
And I don't even know how to formulate this question. The CC&Rs are paid for by the homeowner.
Well, the CCNRs are covenants.
I mean, those
on
are the
land that
rules, yes.
Restrict the use of the land, and they
Yeah,
require.
agreed upon
Yeah.
by the
agreed. Well,
homeowner or the builder?
Not so much the homeowner, because we attached those to the land before the homeowners came along, and they were able to look at those CCNR and say, yeah, I want to buy into this or not.
Mhm.
I mean, if you wanted to live in a house that didn't have restrictions, buying in Riverview Terrace was not the thing to do. Most people, most realty experts would say homes in developments with CCNRs tend to have higher value.
Mhm.
People tend to like restrictions on their neighbors. So,
Well, early in our discussion, though, it was discussed that if this was put into a CCNR requirement, then you wouldn't have that objection.
I would have less objection to it, because that would mean they would subscribe to the same rules. They would pay dues to take care of the landscape that they drive by every morning to and from.
And who
all.
pays for the roads? Who pays?
They're city roads. The city cleans them.
So the homeowner's going to pay?
Currently, the homeowners pay for all, if you've been there, all the landscaping coming into the development, and then the parkway on down now, just out of the picture. All of that is paid for. The homeowners pay a landscape firm to take care of it.
Through the HOA?
Through the HOA, yeah.
So it can be required of this new homeowner to?
Those are part of the CCNRs that you must pay the.
So will that address and satisfy? You feel like it would address those questions?
That would address that. As a developer, then I'm left with, well, the city took this land from us under a pretense that we needed open space, and now they're giving it to somebody else for a fairly small amount of money based on what our experience was. So, that may or may not have legal implications, but it certainly has some moral implications.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. We may call you back.
I just want to make a quick comment?
All right, if you could give us your name and address.
Yeah, my name's Chris Farnett. I live on S Street, and the only thing I wanted to address is you said, well, how is somebody's property value going to be decreased? And the people that live on, in particular, that live on that cul-de-sac, I know for a fact one of the homeowners moved in because none of those homes really have backyards. They just have a deck. They have no yard in the back, and so they use the front as a de facto yard. And one of the homeowners moved there with small kids with the idea that they can just play out there because it's a contained cul-de-sac. So I think when you disrupt that and turn it into a throughway, essentially, it changes the whole dynamic of that part of the neighborhood. So I can't add any more than what they added. I just wanted to answer that.
Chris, could we get your address,
Yeah.
please?
What's that?
Your address, please.
814 S Street.
Thank you. Other members of the public wishing to address council? Yes.
Yeah, my name is Carol Beach, and I'm also a member of Riverview Terrace. I live at 821 West U Street. I moved to Riverview Terrace in 2006, so it was a fairly new development at that time. And I moved from Vancouver. One of the reasons why I moved and chose Riverview Terrace was because of the very strict CCNRs. I lived in a neighborhood that had no restrictions. It was a do whatever you want. We incurred things like people parking old school buses on the street because they intended to renovate them into a camper. We were not able to do anything about it in regard to the city. They took no action. We had the house across the street from me was basically a dump where the single fellow in there was renting out individual bedrooms to people, one of who happened to be a sexual predator. And one day we had the SWAT team come in and take him out. One of the things, for example, that speaks specifically to the Riverview Terrace, and potentially, I don't know, what may or may not occur with this piece of property if a house was built there, but I do know within Riverview Terrace, for example, we have had people who have parked their semi-trucks on the streets because they were a long-haul truck driver and thought that it was perfectly appropriate for them to park their rig either on the street or in the driveway. And these are the kinds of things that we're trying to eliminate and address so that the neighborhood continues to be an exceptionally nice neighborhood. I have no idea, I mean, you know, the people who want to build there may well indeed be fine, upstanding people, but what if they decide to park their school bus in the driveway because they're going to renovate it into a camper? Or someone decides that they're going to put the pickup canopy at the end of the driveway, or they're going to not take care of their property. It's going to look like a mess with trash going down the driveway. These are the kinds of things that we're concerned about. We have great neighbors right now. We want to continue to have great neighbors. That's certainly not, you know, that's why I moved to Riverview Terrace to begin with. So I'm strongly in favor, obviously, of protecting the CC&Rs and the neighborhood that we have. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other folks that wish to address council? Final call? Yes, don't be shy. Good evening.
Mr. Mayor, council members, thank you. My name is Tim Buffett. I'm 812 West T Street in Riverview Terrace, and I'll make this really quick. I'm also on the board for Riverview Terrace, and I moved here in 2006, and I saw our neighborhood go through such a transformation from bad to good. And I'm here to say that I want to protect what we have, because we've seen a lot of people come and go in our neighborhood through some no faults of their own or uncontrolled circumstances. We've also seen Riverview Terrace when it was down at its lowest. And the HOAs have brought this community back up. And I can't answer for the rest of the people in the neighborhood, but for myself, I like living in an area where the rules are people abide by rules, that I know that I'm not going to come home and see things that bothered me 3 or 4 years ago when the neighborhood was growing, when yards are kept up. And, you know, we're still roughing it out with the crisis with homes, the way they are, the market. And we just want to see the neighborhood, we want to guarantee that our neighborhood's going to stay where it is and not go any farther. Not to say that this home would bring it down, but not having it as part of our community and not having that say and the guarantee that this home will abide by the rules that we have set forth and worked for, that's what's unsettling for us right now. And I can't answer, like we said, we can't answer for what the other members of the board or the community would say, but I am opposed to having this easement through our neighborhood until we have more clarification. Thank you.
Thank you.
Clarification, Mr. Mayor?
Yes. Tim?
Yes, sir.
If I may.
Yes.
I'm interested in the fact that everybody that's spoken here tonight from the association has indicated they're in favor of the CC&Rs. Can you give me a rough estimate as a board member of what percentage of your members are in favor of the CC&Rs and how many object to the enforcement of them?
To my knowledge, Councilman, I would say out of 118 lots, I have encountered one person who is against the CC&Rs. One. Other than that, everyone that lives there and who moves into the community is for the CC&Rs, and we have great participation.
I'd like to extend an invitation to your members to join our association, and that would buttress the number of people who believe in the CC&Rs.
Well, we have a lot of hardworking people on the board and in the community. We have get-togethers 3 or 4 times a year. We have community functions. We have neighborhood watch. We went through a big transformation, especially above our neighborhood. There was townhomes built above us, and we're still dealing with a lot of traffic, foot traffic, dog traffic, cars parked on the street, sometimes for days on end. That's spilling into Riverview Terrace. We've been trying to deal with this. We're trying in our best way to not cause a problem, but solve a problem. But having this easement go through our property without notice and not knowing the future, or are they going to participate in our CC&Rs? That's why I'm standing here today.
And the other thing, as a board member, can you give us a feel for how your association members would react if the owner of this property said he'd like to join the association and comply with the CC&Rs.
I could only answer for myself.
Mhm.
I couldn't answer for the other 117 owners, but for myself, I would say I would be a little bit more comfortable if this person says I would be part of the CC&Rs. They're going to be walking through our neighborhood, they're going to be driving through our neighborhood, they're going to share. Their house is going to look good because our homes look good. So, you know, that's about as far as I can go with that. I can't answer for the rest of the members.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr.
Thanks,
Mayor.
Tim. Final call for any other individuals that wish to address
Give you a
council on
chance
the
to have
issue.
Conversation.
Okay, hearing none, I'm going to close the public hearing and turn it over to council. Joe?
Okay. The very first paragraph on the summary statement, it reads like this. As part of the Riverview Terrace subdivision, the developer dedicated a tract of land to the city of Washougal for open space and so forth. And when I read that as someone who's new to the council, looks like out of the goodness of his heart, he dedicated. And I thought, how cool, especially after seeing the area. But now you're saying that that was required, the city required that in order to do the deal. That's kind of a different angle of whether it was just given or whether it was demanded. If we demanded that of them, I'm just curious, I need to know that in order to make a good judgment, if the city required that developer to give that land.
Don, do you recall if that was a requirement of the division?
Don't have any idea.
How do we determine that?
We could pull the preliminary plat and the conditions of approval that came through.
Some of that's in our code, that there's a certain amount of open space in any development that comes along, parks and whatnot, so.
I think it's a subtle difference between whether, Terry, whether your company, development company, offered it up as that, or whether it was a condition required by
Usually there's
the city.
trade-offs of where, how, and so to kind of work for both parties' best interests.
Well, because if the city.
It's clearly a package, you know, in all honesty,
Understood.
It's clearly a package deal, you know. You do this, we do that.
Right.
That was, you know, our firm
And-
was very pro-open space. It was certainly an area where we in the city agreed.
Sure.
There were other areas where we disagreed and we traded off, and we certainly did some horse trading. Well, all right, we'll be more agreeable on the open space if you can be a little more flexible over here on this.
Right.
issue.
But bottom line is.
Giving any open space to the city was something we wouldn't do unless required, because.
You could have had a house on there. You could have done something with it, just like this builder would like to have a house on his property. It's a difficult situation. We're for job growth, we're for carpenters having work, we're for a builder getting a piece of property built on, but we're for standing behind our commitments to the agreement that we had with you. And so, you know, at first, like I said, I see the word dedicated, and I don't know that that means required. So
That's the legal term.
Sure. I'm just saying how that I was reading. I'm not suggesting it is worded wrongly or poorly, but my inexperience possibly. I'm just trying to get to the bottom line. Did we require this, and if so?
I don't know how you'd ever really know unless you went back and were in the room at the time, because it's a package. When you come in with that big of a subdivision, there's streets, there's open space, there's parks, there's all kinds of different requirements, and it's in our code. And so typically, there's some trading that goes on to try and benefit everybody.
Mr. Mayor.
To the extent possible.
Correct me if I'm wrong, usually how this works is the developer comes in, they agree to set aside a certain amount of green open space to the city for the able to develop in a certain area. Where that development, where that green space is placed, from my understanding, is up to the developer, not up to the city.
Not
Is that
necessarily.
correct?
That's why you've got park impact fees and open space impact fees and different things in there. Certainly, the wetland areas would have been conditioned
Sure.
that they be protected. The buffer areas around those as well. I believe this one falls outside of both the wetland and the buffer.
I have not read the Woodburn Hill sub-area plan requirements recently. I don't like to speculate when I'm advising, but I would assume that there are provisions for open space. My home is in the general vicinity. There's open space in just about every subdivision that was recorded. I would assume that there is a requirement for open space. It's typical general land use planning in that kind of a context, and that allows for certain other densities to occur. And so you see a variety of densities there, and the trade-off is open space. You've got the Oak Tree Park, which is a great example of that. It's classic for encumbered ground to be ideally set aside by the private interests, because they're going to have to, there's either such regulatory burden to do anything with it, such as wetland and buffer areas, that it's a great place to do the open space, and that's very standard. Exactly where the open space goes does need to be defined because it becomes part of the recorded plat. So, but that part is part of that give and take in that process. I would assume that in analyzing this, this made the most sense, and then they laid it out very nicely, and it did provide this sort of at the end of the bulb open space area. So it was required, not precisely exactly the way it is. That was part of the negotiation to get a plat that made sense, but certainly it was required as part of our code. There's a high standard around maintaining that open space. The statute provides for this very conversation to happen, and so the statute contemplates this, and that's why you're even able to have this conversation and to make a decision, because it does hold a high place, and it should have this type of a procedure. And in fact, I think there was a public, I'm sure there was a public hearing required to record the plat, which is probably why the statute requires this level of procedure in order to deviate from that, essentially a public hearing process.
Mr. Mayor,
that provides some of the background on that.
Just to follow up real quick, where we left off. I am encouraged that the Homeowner Association is saying that they would be willing to review this piece of property for it to be accepted in the CC&R. I'm encouraged by it because that was the first time that that's even been stated since we've had this discussion, and I was on council the first time we heard this. So the fact that they're open to that is actually, I think a good thing. The other part of that is we need to find out if the developer is open to wanting to join. That's the other question I think we have to ask. And then we also sounds like we have a lot of information we still need to gather on this. So I would entertain a motion to table this, taking it to our next workshop and getting some of these answers.
Okay, I've got a motion and a second to table the item for the next workshop.
Mayor, Mr. Mayor, if I could.
Yes.
We might need more time than next week. If part of what you want to know is, whether they would join the association or not, and some of the other items, table it until we could pull that.
How about okay, for the workshop after next? I mean, we can't force the homeowner association to take a vote and to figure out that's the direction they want to go in that amount of time. But I think it would also show due diligence on their part if this is truly where they're wanting to go, to be able to take a vote and get back to us in time. So whatever you think would be an appropriate amount of time.
Mr. Mayor.
Paul? Mr. Mayor.
A couple of other things that I'd like to see included in there. It's my understanding that there is a building moratorium in Clark County because of stormwater, because they lost the stormwater suit.
No, that's unincorporated Clark County. That doesn't involve the city of Washougal or the city of Camas.
This is Camas ground, the city of Camas.
Okay.
Right.
I also am curious it looks to me like the small yellow parcel and the big one that it's almost an island within have the same owner?
I don't know who owns the...
Well, according to the GIS system, both of them are owned by Liberty Land Development, LLC.
Yes, they are. They're indeed.
So as part of that, I would like to know when the smaller piece was carved out of the bigger piece. And also, does Liberty Land Development own any of the other adjoining parcels? And also, when this comes up, I'd like to see some detail on the Woodburn sub-area plan that all passed before John or I were on council.
Okay, is there any other discussion from council? Okay, so just to make sure, what information is it that we are bringing back from a staff level or from the developer and or the homeowners association?
All the things that were outlined just now by Councilman Greenlee and myself? Is that what you're asking, what we're asking you to do?
Well, if we're going to table it for more information, I want to make sure that we know what the information is.
Right.
So I've got Paul's in there.
Right. We had discussed, well, we wanted, the more information we need to know is if the homeowner association is going to actually take it up and vote on it in that time frame, or whether or not, if they're serious about what they've said tonight. So I mean, there's really no way you can control that, but it would be good to have the city be able to follow up with them to see where they're at in the process.
Our next meeting is April, I think, 24th.
I guess my question is, do you want this item to even come back before they have an opportunity to discuss it and or vote on it, or do you want to not see it come back?
Well, unless we hear back from, if we hear they want to move forward on a vote, then we should wait till that. But if the developer says, I don't want any part of the CCNR, we need to know that before then.
Didn't you already mention that?
The petitioner, you mean, John?
Yes. Yes, I'm sorry.
Well, we're willing to talk about it. By the way, the CCNRs take 90% vote to amend them, so that's a tall order to begin with.
To amend the CCNRs or to add a lot
Well,
to the CCNRs?
That's the same thing. Yeah. To
Good
add
point.
yes. And I think, I mean, it's this document, and it may not make sense to just apply this entire document to one lot, but there may be things in here that would satisfy the homeowners next door, like the design standards. I think they would be concerned about and things like that. And we can work with them on that, hopefully, but it would take 90% of approval.
No, just point of order. The CCNR, if this applied to the piece of property in question, the CCNR would not apply, however, to the home. It would only apply for the lane, the driveway leading up to it. Is that correct?
No, it would apply.
Even though the city, even though it's in Camas and not in Washougal.
Yeah, the CCNRs are private.
The easement already, the land for the easement is already subject to the CCNRs.
Okay.
But whether or not the easement is compliant with it or not,
Right.
we haven't made a determination. But we would suggest that the lot that it accesses be subject to the CCNRs.
Right.
Yeah. And all the other, they're appropriate for all the other homes in Riverview Terrace, so I don't know why all the conditions would be relevant to this lot.
I think what would make sense is to subject this lot to covenants that address the concerns of the neighbors, rather than amending this document, which is probably an impossibility. But I think we can get there through a different way by agreeing to a set of covenants that take a lot of what's in here and apply it to that lot, but not everything. That way we wouldn't need the amendment, we wouldn't need a vote, but we still get to the same place.
Okay.
And if I might, just some explanation from the former realtor. 20% of the exam in Oregon where I took it is on CCNR. So CCNR stands for Codes, Covenants, and Restrictions. They are placed upon the title of a piece of land by a landowner. And once applied and recorded, they are effective, must be held up by that landowner and all subsequent landowners.
And the phrase is, it runs with the title, or it runs with the land. There is no municipal, by and large, there is no municipal participation in CCNRs. In some cases, a municipality may make part of a CCNR unenforceable. For example, in Sandy, Oregon, it used to be true that you had to have a cedar roof. Well, that's a fire hazard, and Sandy said that's no longer enforceable. But that's what CCNRs are. Other than that, the municipality doesn't have any part of CCNRs.
Okay, so back to my question I had a moment ago. Does council desire to have this come back if the motion is successful prior to something being worked out between the homeowners association and the proponent for the easement, or do you wish all of those questions to be as fully answered as they can be before they appear back here at council?
Fully answered.
Most definitely.
Yeah, fully answered unless there's some kind of agreement,
Okay.
yeah.
So I'm, for the moment, I believe that we should likely entertain basically an open-ended tabling, because we certainly will not have any, so the ball would be back in your court if the proposed tabling goes forward to work out however it may work or not. And then at that point, at some point, we've got to bring back and reconvene to finish the hearing itself and the disposition of it, so. Connie Jo, you got a question?
Just point, oh, go ahead.
You were making a list, and this just jumped out at me. It talks about staff further determined that there was not any stream or significant water activity impacting the proposed easement area. And we just had a discussion about that river coming down there seemingly might cause a problem in the future, but is this talking about specifically just the easement area, or is it talking about the land?
We're dealing
Of this
just with the
lot,
easement.
just the
in our
easement,
staff
so that's not, that's an issue that's been determined,
For the
that it's
easement.
not an issue.
Right, we have, there's no regulatory, outside of this open space designation, there's no critical areas is the context for wetlands and streams and buffers in play for the ground where the proposed easement lies. The city of Camas has, I'm sure, similar provisions to our own, and if there's any issue or consequence related to this natural stream that appears to dead end, as it was alluded, on the property, they'll have to go through those regulatory hurdles when they get a
Okay.
permit from the city.
So
if
we as
decide.
council don't need to be concerned about that river or stream.
That would be, we dealt with that as far as where it is in Washougal, and will continue. And where it is in Camas, I'm sure it would be dealt with very similarly, because I'm sure they have very similar provisions.
Okay, thank
Follow-on
you.
question on that. I haven't seen the new draft on the shoreline. Would the new shoreline change those rules?
I would be surprised if this was in Shoreline's jurisdiction.
Jennifer?
I have a question about fair market value. I see it's listed at $2,000, and I'm just curious to know when that was assessed.
That was assessed when it came before council before, so 2007 time, 2007 when they were here before, and they had a formal appraisal.
And was the subdivision built out at that time?
2007, yeah.
Yes.
It was built out?
It was platted about 2005, I believe.
Okay. I'm just curious to know if those dollars are still correct in 2012.
We'd have to have another appraisal done. I can tell you general market trends between 2007 and 2012. I think it's probably safe. I think the question that was brought up is, was the original value accurate?
Yeah,
I'm assuming that we had an appraisal done in 2007.
Yeah, and I share your concern, Jennifer. $2,000 for a piece 80 feet by 20.
I'm going to bring this one back. The motion on the table is for tabling the item.
Yes.
Further
thank you.
discussion, we could do it another
If you
time.
wouldn't mind adding that to
As
the
far as
list.
the information, you bet.
Thank you.
Any other items that we're looking for specifically for staff to bring back?
Mr. Mayor, a point of order?
Yes.
Are we tabling a motion, or are we adjourning the public hearing?
We already adjourned the public hearing. The motion on the table is to table the item itself to a further meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. I had the same question, Councilman.
Okay, so I've got a motion and a second to table the item to a future workshop followed by council meeting. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. So I believe Leanne and, was it Steve, who's the head of the homeowner association? So somewhere, my belief is you all need to get together and kind of talk about paths forward and what may happen there to bring that information back. And then, Leanne, if the proponent is in favor of the indemnification and hold harmless agreement, that we have that all entered into the record as well. Are there, Don, any other items that takes care of whatever question your CCNR, whether you decide to come up with something different on CCNRs or you allow them into the association or whatever? We're just looking for an answer to that.
I think Leanne indicated that they were comfortable with the indemnification.
Okay. That ends that one for this evening. Thank you all for being here. If I can suggest, why don't we take about a 2-minute break here before we go on to the next couple of public hearings. I don't imagine that they're going to be real long.
2 minutes stretch.
2-minute stretch. 7:20, we are back.